Hey everyone, it's Yajin here with Gimme CrossFit, and today we're going to show you a couple of exercises that you can use to help strengthen your knees. Now, the reason why I want to put this video together is I feel that the knees are one area that has a slightly higher risk of injury, because we have to understand that when it comes to knee strength, there are two muscle groups that mainly control the function of our knee. And the first muscle group is the quads, or the quadriceps group, that runs along the front side of our thigh here between our knees and our hips. That side tends to get a lot more attention compared to our hamstrings, which runs along the back side here between our knees and our glutes. Now, personally, I play a sport called badminton where I can see firsthand that a lot of the movement and motion involved helps strengthen the quads, however, doesn't pay as much attention to the hamstrings. And because of that, we see a very high rate of injury in the knees because of that imbalance. Because we have to also understand that these two muscle groups have to work together, and if one group is kind of lagging behind and not putting out as much power and strength as it's supposed to, then the other muscle has to kind of drag it along, and over time that leads to overuse. And when you overuse it for a longer period of time, that increases your risk of injury. So not only is this important to help us, become stronger and function better during our activities and our movements, but it's also going to help us be able to do these activities for a longer period of time without having to be so worried about the risk of injury there. So what we're going to talk about today is a couple of exercises, and I'm going to run you through these one by one. We're going to start out with exercises that isolate the function of the quads and then the hamstrings, so that if you feel that you need to work on one of these more than the other, you can train these independent of one another, or focus on one more than the other. And then at the end, we're going to show you some more functional movements that bring all of the leg muscles together, because although I do see a lot of benefit in training these muscles one by one to help even out any imbalances, at the end of the day, we want to be able to bring all of this together and train them in a way that we can basically replicate how we're going to function, whether through activities of daily life or sports performance and workouts in particular. So with that being said, let's dive into it and go through these exercises real quick. All right, so we're about to dive into the exercises that you're able to implement here to help strengthen your knees in a moment. But before we get into that, do us a quick favor, drop us a like, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and share this with a friend, family, or colleague who you think could benefit from having stronger knees and reducing their risk of injury during exercise. So let's jump into it. Now, the first movement that we're going to cover is going to be one that focuses on the quads. So remember, this is the one on the front side of our legs running between the knee and our hips. Now, the movement that we're going to be focusing on is just the basic squat, and we're going to run through a couple of variations here that you can practice on your own. Now, squats are a great movement for overall body function, lower body function. However, the main focus that the squats do is target the quads, again, on the front side of the leg. And as far as form and technique, if we were to just do a regular body weight squat here, I'm going to set this down real quick, is we're going to open up our feet about shoulders width apart, and you're going to sit back just like if you were sitting back into a chair. And once we get to the bottom, we're going to pause real quick and press straight on upwards. When we're pushing here, from the bottom of the motion, we're pushing through our heels. You want to make sure the weight on your feet are evenly balanced across. However, on the way up, we're going to get a strong push through the heels. Now, one mistake that people tend to make is either they shift too much of the weight onto the front of their feet. Sometimes you're even going to see people's heels lift off of the floor. Now, we really want to push through the heels. That's going to take some of that strain off of your knees while you're doing this movement. So again, sitting back, pushing through the heels. And one thing I like people to focus on as beginners when you're just starting to squat for the first couple of times is when you hit the bottom, just pause your motion, okay? So down, pause, and once you're ready, get a strong push and push straight on up. The reason why we do that is to avoid any bobbing up and down that might happen at the bottom of the motion, which I see more often when people don't take the time to really pause and you just bounce straight back up there. Okay, now if you're practicing these squats and it feels a little difficult for you to go through. As far as like the intensity, it might feel a little heavy, your knees, your legs might hurt while you're going through this motion, then a really easy way to kind of scale this exercise down so that you can practice this and build your strength and technique up so that you can come back to this later on is to start just from a seated position. So you can just grab a chair, a bench, anything that you're able to sit down on, and we're gonna start from that seated position. So if we imagine we had that chair or bench behind us right here, we would sit back, and from this position, we would just push straight on upwards. Onto the chair or bench, straight on up. So those were a couple reps to show you just how the basic squat looks like. Now, a couple of variations that can benefit you in helping strengthen the quads on the front of your legs there is what we call a half squat. Now, for this movement, we're pretty much gonna start from the bottom of that squatting position, just like if we were sitting on a chair or a bench or something there, and we're only gonna go through half of the squat. So again, feet are open about shoulders width apart. We're gonna start from right here, and from here, we're gonna come up halfway, not all the way. We're gonna stop halfway up and then drop back down. All right, so from the bottom, up halfway, back down, up halfway, back down, up halfway. Now, what that does is it keeps our quads here under tension for just about all of the time that we're moving up and down in that position, which really, you're gonna feel these start to burn a lot, especially as you do more and more. So again, the half squat, drop down, up. So notice how while I'm doing that, I'm trying to do my best to control the movement so there's not too much shaking. I like to say the squat is really an up and down motion. We shouldn't have too much side to side movement while we're doing that squat. So again, it's up and down. Not so much side to side. So we're gonna try not to sway or swing too much while we're going through our squats. So now you can go do bodyweight squats on your own or some half squats to help strengthen out the front of your thighs, your quads over there. Now, if you wanna scale the intensity up a little more, a really easy way to go about that is really just grabbing on some sort of weight at the gym. If you have access to a barbell or something, this is not a barbell, this is just a PVC pipe. But as demonstration, if we were to do barbell squats, you're able to scale the weight up a lot higher. However, if you're just at home and you have a couple of weights lying around, a dumbbell, a kettlebell, like the one I have here, we can go ahead, grab onto this, hold it up to the chest, and go through our squats just like that there. All right. Now, if you do add any weight onto it, one thing I want to point out real quick, and we can dive into more details, if this topic is something you're interested in, go ahead, drop a comment for us in the comment section below, and I'd be happy to create a video that dives a little more into different squat techniques that you can be doing as well. But whenever we load extra weight, we're gonna make sure to keep our core muscles engaged, and that's around our stomach region. That's gonna really help support our lower back, keep that still while we're going through these motions, but also help our upper body and our lower body move in unison, okay? So again, those are a couple squat techniques that you can go through so that you can strengthen your quads and develop more strength around your knees, okay? Now the second movement that I have for you here is going to be a deadlift variation. Now, this variation is called a stiff leg deadlift, where we're not gonna move too much of the leg from the knee down. Now, for those of you who have never deadlifted before, I would actually highly recommend you start out practicing a basic hip hinge. Again, that's something we can dive into in another video if those of you, or if there are people out there who you think would benefit from your hip hinging motion. Now, I'm gonna start with this dowel here, just as practice. If you have like a broomstick or something laying around, it would be really great for you to use this to practice the hip hinging. We're just gonna dive into this real quickly here. What we're gonna do with this is we're gonna hold this behind our back. There's 3 points we wanna make sure is touching. It's gonna be the bone between our butt right there, middle of our spine, and then top of our head. Make sure at all points these 3 areas are touching the stick. It's gonna help us keep our spine straight. while we go through this motion. If one of them starts to lift off of the stick, then make sure you realign it, okay? And how we're gonna hold this, one hand's gonna be in this dip right here behind our lower back, and one's gonna be behind our neck. We're gonna start standing up nice and straight. Feet or shoulders width apart. We're gonna push our hips back, and then we're gonna straighten back out, okay? So from the side, push back, and straighten back out. Push back, straighten back out. Push back, and straighten back out. When we push back, we're pushing back with the hips. So I want this movement to start from the hips, and we're pushing back, and then straightening out. Our knees are allowed to get a slight bend there. Push back, and straighten out. Push back, and straighten out. Now, for those of you who have really tight hamstrings, you might notice that you're gonna get to this point where you can't really push back any further. That's okay. I don't want you to push back so far that you're starting to feel pain in the back of your legs while you're doing that. However, over time, we want to gradually push back just a little farther and stretch those hamstrings out as we go as well. So again, push back and straighten. Push back and straighten. Again, we're hinging from the hips here, slight bend in the knees, and we're keeping our core engaged. Lower back over here is nice and straight. Push back. Cool. Now, so that's just your basic hip hinge. We're gonna take that movement and apply it into a stiff-legged deadlift here, where if you have some form of weight, you can go ahead and grab onto that. If not, you can actually practice this hinging motion without the weight as well. In this case, we're gonna be using a kettlebell. So we're gonna grab onto this, make sure we got a firm grip. We're gonna open up our shoulders a little bit here, push back, and then straighten out. So while we're going through this motion, you should feel a slight pull in the back of your legs. Your hamstrings are engaging here, as well as your glutes, where your hips, back of your hips and around your hips are. Now, the reason why this is a straight-legged or a stiff-legged deadlift is we're not gonna have any motion from the knee down. So notice again, push back. And that's gonna allow us to focus a lot more on the hamstring muscles on the back of our legs there. Again, that's one of the muscles that tends to be a little underworked and neglected when it comes to knee strength and stability. So it's one of the ones I would highly recommend you practice a bit more often, especially if you know that your hamstrings do get neglected when you're either working out, exercising, or performing in whatever sport or activity that you do on a regular basis. So far we've covered the front of the legs here, something to work on the back of the legs. And for those of you who work a lot of squats, I would definitely recommend supplementing those squats with some deadlifts as well. Although the squats do have a really great ability to target most of the muscles in the lower body here, the amount of engagement we're getting in the hamstrings during the squats is only roughly around 25% of the capacity that they actually have. So we want to make sure to supplement that with an activity that does help activate the hamstrings a lot more and therefore strengthen them, okay? So now we've gone over how you can strengthen the front of your legs and the back of your legs, right? Your quads and your hamstrings. Now I'm going to give you an activity that I would highly recommend you. It's a really well-rounded exercise that you can practice once you feel like you've gotten to a certain balance with your lower body muscles there. And honestly, this is going to train most of the muscles throughout your entire body and is a great exercise for anyone, especially if you're sitting in a desk for long hours throughout the day. Now, I will say that this one's kind of biased towards the back, the posterior chain, all the muscles on the back side of our body there. However, the reason why is because we tend to be very front dominated, especially again if we're sitting in a desk for long hours throughout the day, and this exercise not only incorporates all of the muscles that we should be using, but it does so while kind of rounding out the edges of the weaknesses that we may have here. So with the kettlebell swing, we're gonna wanna make sure that that before you jump into this exercise, you've practiced your hip hinge a lot and you've got that motion down, because this is gonna highly incorporate that, okay? And we're gonna start with a kettlebell. We're gonna grab onto this, hands are gonna be at the top. This is gonna be hanging downwards, okay? So we're gonna start with our feet about shoulders width apart, toes are slightly rotated outwards. And then we're gonna push our hips back and drop down to this position. Now, when we're in this position, to get ready for this swinging motion, we're gonna push back just a little bit. And a good example that people use is it's almost like throwing a football or hiking a football backwards. I don't personally play football, but that's a really great example for you to start out with here. So when you're ready, hike it back and swing upwards. Now you're gonna notice when we start this motion out, we're pushing our hips backwards, pushing the hips back, and then from this position, you're pretty much just standing up straight and straightening the hips out, okay? So from here, up straight, and we're straightening the hips out. Now while we straighten the hips out, that's gonna engage our hamstrings. First of all, it's actually gonna get a little push out of our quads here. Our hamstrings are gonna engage, and then our hips are gonna be the ones that helps, our glutes around our hips here are going to be the ones that help straighten our hips out in that position. So you can kind of see here that all of the muscles in our lower body are getting engaged and activated, as well as our core muscles to help stabilize the motion as it moves into our upper body. A couple reps on the side here, push back. So honestly, this movement is great for strength building. It's great for cardio. I'm a little out of breath here just showing you that motion here, but honestly, this is one of the best workouts that you can be doing out there. It only requires a kettlebell. So it's definitely something I would recommend you involve in your workouts on a regular basis. So we've covered 3 different categories of exercises here today, focusing a lot on the hip hinging movement and the back of the legs, where I feel that many of us tend not to give as much attention to, and therefore they get neglected. So in the long run, we're more likely to experience injuries due to that reason. So I hope you practice these on your own, give them a shot. Let me know what you think of these exercises, and if there's anything else that you are interested in having us cover, go ahead, drop them in the comments below, shoot us a little message. Be more than happy to address those. So those are a couple exercises that I would really recommend that you practice regularly to help improve and increase the strength of the muscles that control your knees. Of course, that's going to help lower your risk of injury and just function better overall, whether you're doing this for sport or just to move better throughout your activities of daily life. Now, if this video was helpful to you, do me a favor and just give it a quick like, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and share this with a friend who you think could also benefit from having stronger knees and reducing their risk of injury when they are getting themselves active and moving as well. Thanks for watching.